this month actually, we're looking at the book of Exodus, and throughout the year we'll be with a few other topics that we'll be looking at. We're looking basically at the book of Exodus, the book of Exodus. Last week we looked at chapter 1, and today we are looking at chapter 2, and the topic is engage. The topic is engage. We're going to read the Bible together. It is my prayer and my hope that you are reading through the book of Exodus as we begin the year 2026, and not just reading by yourself, but if you have a friend or you have family, that you are reading together, asking questions, going deeper, and trying to find out what God is teaching us through the book of Exodus. If the scripture is up, we are all going to stand up. That is if you can stand, because it's 25 verses. That's long. If you can't stand, please feel free to just remain seated. It is from verse 1 all the way to verse 25. Right, Exodus chapter 2 from verse 1 to 25. Now a man of the tribe of Levi married a Levite woman, and she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. When she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. Then she placed the child in it and put it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. His sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. Then Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walking along the riverbank. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her female slave to get it. Verse 6. She opened it and saw the baby. He was crying, and she felt sorry for him. This is one of the Hebrew babies, she said. Then his sister, shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you? Yes, go, she answered. So the girl went and got the baby's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, take this baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you. So the woman took the baby and nursed him. When the child grew older, she took him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses, saying, I drew him out of the water. Verse 11. One day after Moses had grown up, he went out to where his own people were and watched them at their hard labor. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his own people. Looking this way and that and seeing no one, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. The next day he went out and saw 2 Hebrews fighting. He asked the one in the wrong, why are you hitting your fellow Hebrew? The man said, who made you ruler and judge over us? Are you thinking of killing me as you killed the Egyptian? Then Moses was afraid and thought, When Pharaoh heard of this, he tried to kill Moses. But Moses fled from Pharaoh and went to live in Midian, where he sat down by a well. Verse 16. Now a priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came to draw water and fill the troughs to water their father's flock. Some shepherds came along and drove them away. But Moses got up and came to their rescue and watered their flock. When the girls returned to Reuel, their father, he asked them, why have you returned so early today? They answered, an Egyptian rescued us from the shepherds. He even drew water for us and watered the flock. Where is he? Reuel asked his daughters. Why did you leave him? Invite him to have something to eat. Verse 21. Moses agreed to stay with a man who gave his daughter Zipporah to Moses in marriage. Foreigner in a foreign land. During that long period, the king of Egypt died. The Israelites groaned in their slavery and cried out. And their cry for help because of their slavery went up to God. God heard their groaning, and he remembered his covenant with Abraham. So God looked on the Israelites, about them. May the Lord bless the reading of his word. Please be seated. I have a sermon outline, and the sermon outline, I'll be looking basically at those who engaged in this journey by faith, and then I'll also look at the covenant-keeping God. In regard to those who engaged, I have about 6 of them that I'll be looking at. I'll be looking at the Levite or a Levite. I'll be looking at the aspect of a mother or women. I'll also be looking at a sister. Or if you like young people, I'll be looking at the princess. Those in power, I'll be looking at a prince, and I'll be looking at a foreigner. And so if you get that, if you're writing, let's start with a Levite. A Levite. You know, verse 1, Moses brings out the fact that a man who was from the tribe of Levi married a Levite woman. That may seem like it may not look like anything serious. But you may, if you just start by reading chapter 2, you may be surprised. Who is a Levite? You have to go back to chapter 1. And when you look at chapter 1, you see the first 7 verses. The author, who is Moses, gives us the list of Israel or Jacob's 12 sons. And among those sons is Levi. But to understand the concept of why Moses brings out this issue of the Levite or the Levi is because you have now to go back to Genesis chapter 45 and also chapter 49. Because Levi had done something in the book of Genesis that up to this particular time, as Moses is writing Exodus, was hanging up on his generation and on his clan and on his shoulders. The people of the sons, there was Judah, there was Simeon, then there was Levi. So he and Simeon, they had a sister. This sister was called Dinah, and she was raped. And so they went to these people who had raped their sister, and they convinced them. They told them, you know what, why don't you circumcise your men, and then we can intermarry and even trade and so on and so forth. So these people went, the Shechemites, they circumcised themselves and believing that these people were genuine. And then Simeon and Levi went and killed all those people. They hamstrung their animals. And basically, they had thought through this. They had planned it, and they murdered those people. They killed those people. And because of that, Israel, Jacob, was not happy. This is what he says in Genesis chapter 49 from verse 5 to 7. He says, Simeon and Levi are brothers. Their swords are weapons of violence. Let me not enter their council. Let me not join their assembly. For they have killed men in their anger and hamstrung oxen as they pleased. Cursed be their anger and fierce, and their fury so cruel. I will scatter them in Jacob and disperse them in Israel. So if you look at the pegging order of Israel, Judah was, of course, denied the position of firstborn because Reuben. He was denied the position of firstborn because he slept in his father's bed. But still he was going to get an inheritance in Israel. But when it came to Simeon and Levi, they were going to be dispersed. Because there are some people that Israel lost, Jacob is feeling, if these people are together, they are destructive. So let them be scattered so that they don't cause problems. People like Bishop Mugare here, when there was a coup in this country in 1982, they were at the university, and they were all told to be reporting to the chiefs in their rural home. He escaped prison by a few, one way or another. But that is how the government, they just dispersed them. So Jacob said, these ones, they are not worth to be together. He discussed them. In fact, when you look at Simeon, he's ensconced in Judah. He hardly is he talked about. And so in the pegging order of importance, you'll find Simeon is at the very bottom, and then followed by Levi. So at this particular time, Levi is not a priest. That will happen now later in the book of Leviticus and after the people have been released and when they get to Mount Sinai and beyond. But for now, as Moses is writing, these are outcasts. These are the Levites. They are outcasts. You know, Israel as a whole, as a tribe, they were looked down upon. They were despised by the Egyptians because of their trade and just who they are. So you can imagine a group of people who are despised, but within that despised group, among themselves, among the least is Levi. So you are the least among the least, or you are despised among the despised. So I have some 2 books. Could you give me those books, Reverend Pitson? This book is written by Moses. I was reading these books. My son came and asked me, "What are you reading?" And I went through them. I had read this. This is the biography of John Adams. It's written by David. And I had read it some time back. It's a biography. What David does is David goes to the libraries and looks for information about John Adams. John Adams was the first vice president of the U.S. and became the second president of the U.S. His son also became a president of the U.S. David is a very good writer. But there is a book here, it's a memoir. This is written by A.A. Ikirapa. He's writing his own story. The difference between a biography and a memoir is just French for memory and Latin, comes from the same root for Latin. It's about memory, writing from memory. So Ikirapa is still alive. He's 90 this year. And he released these books a few months ago. And it's a memoir that I'm reading. So when you come to Moses, when you look at chapter 2 of the book of Exodus, Moses is writing memoirs. He's the one writing. Now, you know Moses, some of these stories he got it from his mother because his mother looked after him for some time. Some of the stories he got from his sister, probably even from Aaron because they worked together. But the Bible says when it came to Moses, God talked to him face to face. So there are certain details that Moses got directly from God. Others it was from his own experience. Now there are cases of biographies of Moses within the Bible. So for example, if you go to the book of Acts chapter 7, there's a biography of Moses that when Stephen is being stoned and is about to die, he gives a biography of Moses. The writer to Hebrews also gives a biography of Moses. That is people who are looking back in history and writing about Moses. And there are a few other places that you find. But when it comes to Exodus chapter 2, it's a memoir. It's Moses himself writing. And what Moses is saying, he's looking back and he's wondering, how can I, from a tribe that is an outcast, a people that are rejected among the people that are rejected, be standing here and be used of God? And that is basically what he's saying to us. And this is also not strange when you look at people like Paul. They write of their backgrounds and they're like, how can it be? Me who was a sinner of sinners, I who was a murderer, that I can find a place among the people of God to be used of God. And so Moses is basically challenging us to engage. But you may say, I'm so bad. You don't know my history. The Levites had failed morally. They had failed spiritually. They had failed relationally. Because Jacob tells them, what is going to happen to the tribes around me when they hear you have killed these people? And you may be here and you're in that category and you're feeling you've been so rejected in your family or you failed so much. And such that you want to be on the periphery. And you don't even want to know, you don't believe that God is able to engage you. What Moses, the author of this book, is telling us is that the wonder of this God, and this is the Old Testament, the second book of the Old Testament, he will pass the pegging order and go to those who feel they are on the periphery and draw them close to him. That's powerful. One of my best sermons last year was by our pastor, Pastor Beatty. And it was titled, Let Me Tell You Something. And as she stood here, I was following it online because I was away. And she was basically asking, how can I be standing up here, given where my history or given where I'm coming from? And you may be here and you're feeling, for me, I can't engage. Because if anyone knew my history, how I have failed in my relationships, how I have failed morally, how I have failed spiritually, they will not accept me. God will not accept me. But you see, that is the scandal of the gospel. That God goes for us when we are weakest. And if you feel that you have a friend or a sister or someone in your life who you feel you cannot even touch, not with a 10-foot pole because of who they are, probably this is the year for you to engage with them. Why? Because God has chosen to engage with people who are down the pegging order. But let me tell you something. Do you know, in the book of Genesis, chapter 3, when Adam and Eve sinned, they had to leave the Garden of Eden. They were locked out. And because of that, we are by nature all outcasts. And so when you look at someone and decide to dismiss that person, you are like an outcast rejecting an outcast. You have no moral authority or spiritual authority to stand in judgment of anybody. And so we are called here to engage not only in the things of God, whether we are feeling we are on the periphery, whether we are outcasts or whatever, however our past looks like, or whichever family we've come from. Like Moses is saying here, I come from the family of Levi. It's of course hundreds of years. They still have some of the challenges. It's not that the challenges are over. You just need to look at Moses and see his anger, even in future. And in fact, that's what caused him not to enter the promised land. So it's not that they have dealt with all their faults. It seems to be a generational thing that is just flowing among them, their sinful nature. And so sometimes when you have faced rejection or you feel rejected, and generally this is a general statement, sometimes when as a nation we've been colonized by other people, it is so easy for us to feel a collective sense of rejection and feel very low at the bottom. But then God reaches out to people who are at that level. Because when you've been so rejected to enter many circles, or even yourself, you've caused yourself to feel like you are rejected, it becomes difficult for you to feel that God can accept you in his circles. And some people assume that it is only in the New Testament that Jesus begins to sit with sinners and to accept sinners. And in fact, it was a scandal to the Pharisees that Jesus was sitting with the sinners, the people who were outcasts. But it's not only in the New Testament. Right here in the Old Testament, God is extending the boundary and saying, come. And so Moses is writing this memoir, and he's like, I, from the tribe of Levi, my parents, both of them, are from Levi. It's not a mix. It's not like his mother was from Judah and his father was from Levi. No, they were both from the Levite family. Why is this the case? Because God is drawing us to the fact that the mercies of God are greater than our sins and our failures. And that this holy God has chosen to call us to engage wherever you come from. And so this year we're inviting all of you to engage meaningfully wherever you are from a point of grace, from a point of the mercy of God. That's why writing to the Romans, it says, in view of God's mercies, because you've experienced the mercies of God, engage, be transformed, and be an influence to others. And so I don't know what God may be telling you this morning. Maybe it's you yourself that just needs to rise up from your failures and stop feeling I'm a failure, I can't do this. And raise to where God is calling you to. Or maybe you're not in that position and you know somebody who is going through that. And you need to be there for them. And so the chapter just begins with a very simple word. a man from Levi, married a Levite woman. And then they get a child. And so it talks of the mother of this child. She goes and hides the child. She hides the child for 3 months, and when she can no longer hide the child, she organizes for how he can be hidden outside. If you look at the book of Exodus, this is the third time a woman is mentioned. The first time was in chapter 1. And the first woman to be mentioned there was Shiphrah. The second was Puah. They were midwives. We looked at them last week. It doesn't mean that they were the only Hebrew midwives in Egypt, but they were high in office. They're the ones who oversaw all the midwives, or the Hebrew midwives in Egypt. And in fact, they were so high that the Pharaoh could talk with them direct. And not only could he talk with them direct, he trusted their word. So when they told Pharaoh, the Hebrew women, they are very vigorous, Pharaoh believed them. And we looked at the fact that if you are in a high office, wherever you work, just like Shiphrah and Puah, you can influence society so much, because it says that the population of Israel increased because of these two women. And so when we get to chapter 2, one of the beneficiaries of Shiphrah and Puah is this child who's been born by the name of Moses. Now, Moses takes us, now, apart from the professional woman making an impact where she is at that particular level, he takes us to another woman. This is a woman whose husband, the name is not even given in chapter 2. The name of the woman herself is not even given. We're just told she's a Levite, just to show us how low she was. It is an ordinary person. Probably she herself was also engaged as a slave somewhere, but the husband definitely was. Because we were told in chapter 1 how the men they had to work and be pushed and everything. And probably the women had to go and also work as slaves in the domestic spaces. And so this woman is engaged domestically in her home. And her congregation is her children. Her congregation is her son who is in trouble. The environment is so hostile. It is difficult, but she's engaged. And at this particular time, Satan's push, I told you last week about the spiritual warfare that is taking place at this particular time because of the seed of the woman. There is a lot that is happening, the droughts and now Satan using the government. And you will see later, even by the time Jesus was born, the boys were to be killed. What Satan really enjoys is when he divides men and women. And when men and women do not work together. And when men put women down, but also when women put men down. But in this case, there is a reversal of the Garden of Eden here. The women are rising up and they want to protect the male in society. Because when men are enslaved, when men have no jobs, when men are ridiculed and put down, when they can't look after their own children, it is an extremely difficult time for them. When a man can't speak to his own family because he has to leave by 5 and be back at 10 at night. What happens here is this lady rises up and does what she needs to do. She counters the work of Satan. But you see also, he mentions here a woman because if you look at the first 7 verses of chapter 1, you all know that Jacob had 12 sons and he had a daughter called Dinah. But she's not mentioned because this was a very patriarchal society. And in a very patriarchal society, the women were at the low level. But here women are mentioned 3 times. What we are being called in Exodus is some of you feel so ordinary, and some of us feel so ordinary. When my son, about 2 weeks ago, he came from college, and he was asking me what I'm reading. And he asked me, I was reading these memoirs, and he asked me, Dad, will you write a memoir yourself? I told him, what? I have nothing to write about, even who will read it. I'm not sure I plan to write one. But maybe you feel you have nothing to contribute. My son told me, you've been a pastor for so long. Can't pastors benefit from your journey? And I thought, I just made a statement before my son that might not be very nice. And maybe you're constantly making statements about yourself. You're even given privileges and opportunities to engage and to step up and to do things, not just for church, but for yourself, for your family. But you feel I'm so ordinary. And I can't even step forward. Maybe you have a business opportunity and you're saying, I can't step forward. I'm not able to do. I'm so ordinary. And Moses is probably calling us to engage. And I thank God for this team that Benson has just introduced here. They are calling us to engage. But how do they engage? Allow me to read Hebrews chapter 11, verse 23. I don't know if it's up on the screen. If you can put it up on the screen. How did this woman, this mother, engage? It says by faith. Now this is a biography by people who, biography by people who had read this story. They say by faith, Moses' parents hid him for 3 months after he was born, because they saw he was no ordinary child, and they were not afraid of the king's edict. Stepping forward and engaging is very fearful. It brings out fear. It makes us to fear. I was really amazed this week. We've had a lot of people leading prayer. And one of the ladies who was leading prayer said, I am so nervous. And I was saying, you're on Zoom. No one is there. You just speak. And it's very difficult sometimes to step up and engage. But she did. But you see, the antidote to fear is faith. Why? Because faith is believing in one who is more powerful than what you fear. And today I don't know what you fear. But whatever you fear, you're making a statement that your God is smaller than what you fear. And the Bible, Moses is telling us, or not Moses, the parents of Moses are telling us, they were not going to obey Pharaoh because he's smaller than God. They were not going to obey injustice because God is bigger and is a God of justice. This woman went ahead to raise her children. She raised Miriam, who was a worship leader, and she raised Aaron, who was the first high priest of Israel. And so in a short time, having a window to raise Moses in a very short time, she raised him in such a way that even when he was in the palace, in the foreign hands and with power, the corruption of power, he stood firm and led his people. Do you sometimes feel that your role is so small that you can't give it 100%? What kind of memoirs will your children write about you? What kind of memoirs will your brothers and sisters write about you? I was listening to Patrick Mbogo, and he was just talking of how his father influenced him. His father has passed away 4 years ago. What will they say about you? Are you willing to take steps of faith like these parents? As preachers, especially for this week, I think I prepared beyond the time I had. The bishop is going to have a meeting with me, and then the executive pastor will summon me at some point. But I want to ask us to close at this particular time. For those of you who take notes, to be continued.